Hey everyone, welcome back to the Alpha Lodge channel. Today we're diving into something really important, how to actually heal from PTSD. And I want to be clear from the start, this isn't about quick fixes or just think positive advice. Real healing is possible, but it takes understanding what trauma actually does to us and what the path forward really looks like. So let's start with the basics. PTSD isn't just being stressed or having bad memories. When you go through something traumatic, your brain and body literally change how they operate. Your nervous system gets rewired to be on constant high alert. It is like your internal smoke detector becomes hypersensitive. Suddenly everything sets it off, even when there is no actual danger. And this isn't a character flaw or weakness. It is your biology trying to protect you, even when the protection becomes the problem. Now, here is something crucial that a lot of people miss. Healing happens in stages. It is not linear. You are not going to wake up one day and be cured. But understanding these stages can help you recognize where you are and what is coming next. The first stage is what we might call pre-awareness or shock. Right after trauma, your mind often protects you by shutting down. You might feel numb, disconnected, like you are watching your life from outside your body. This is actually a survival mechanism. Your brain is saying, this is too much to process right now. And that is okay. Denial isn't always bad. It is a buffer that keeps you stable when emotions would otherwise overwhelm you. But eventually, that shock starts to fade. And that is when we enter the second stage, acknowledgement and pain. This is where the real feelings start surfacing. Anger, grief, fear, sometimes all at once. A lot of people get stuck here because anger feels scary, or the sadness feels bottomless. But here is the thing. Feeling these emotions is actually progress. It means you are moving from being numb to being alive again. The key is learning to navigate these feelings without getting overwhelmed by them. This leads us into the third stage, active healing work. And this is where different approaches come in, because there is no one size fits all solution. What we know from research is that the most effective treatments share some common elements, even if they look different on the surface. Let's talk about what actually works. Cognitive behavioral therapy, or CBT, is one of the most studied approaches. It helps you identify the thought patterns that keep you stuck. The ones that say, I am not safe, or it is my fault, and gradually reshape them. There is also trauma-focused CBT, which specifically helps you process the traumatic memory itself, not just the symptoms. Then, there is EMDR, eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. This one sounds a bit strange at first. It involves recalling the traumatic experience while doing specific eye movements or other bilateral stimulation. The research shows it can be incredibly effective, sometimes faster than traditional talk therapy. Nobody's entirely sure why it works, but the theory is that it helps your brain reprocess the memory so it stops feeling as vivid and immediate. But here is where it gets really interesting. There is growing recognition that trauma isn't just stored in our minds, it is stored in our bodies. This is where somatic therapies come in. Approaches like somatic experiencing focus on the physical sensations associated with trauma. The idea is that when we experience something overwhelming, our bodies often get stuck in the fight, flight, or freeze response. We might have all this pent-up energy that never got discharged because we couldn't run or fight back at the time. Somatic therapy helps you tune into your body's signals, where you are holding tension, how your breathing changes, what happens in your gut when you think about the trauma. Through techniques like pendulation, moving between states of tension and relaxation, and titration, processing small pieces of the trauma at a time, you can gradually release that stored energy. It is not about reliving the trauma over and over. It is about completing the stress response that got interrupted. And then there is the nervous system regulation piece. This is huge. When you have PTSD, your autonomic nervous system is basically stuck in overdrive. You might be in sympathetic activation, that fight or flight state, constantly. Or you might swing into dorsal vagal shutdown, where you feel numb, disconnected, unable to move. Healing involves learning to regulate this system. Simple practices can make a real difference here. Breathwork isn't just trendy. Slow, deep breathing actually activates your parasympathetic nervous system, the rest and digest mode. Grounding techniques like feeling your feet on the floor or noticing 5 things you can see and hear can pull you out of flashbacks and back into the present moment. These aren't just coping strategies. They're retraining your nervous system to recognize safety. Now, let's talk about something that doesn't get enough attention: the social dimension of healing. Trauma often happens in isolation, and healing often requires connection. But here's the tricky part. Trauma can also make trust feel incredibly dangerous. You might push people away, or find yourself in relationships that reenact the trauma. Part of recovery is learning to build what we call earned secure attachment, relationships where you feel safe, seen, and supported. This might involve couples therapy if your trauma is affecting your partnership, or family therapy if there are dynamics that need to shift. Sometimes it means carefully building a support network of people who get it, who won't minimize your experience or try to rush your healing. There's also the question of medication. For some people, especially in the early stages, medication can be a lifeline. SSRIs can help take the edge off the anxiety and depression that often come with PTSD. They can make it possible to engage in therapy when otherwise you'd be too overwhelmed. But medication typically manages symptoms. It doesn't cure the underlying trauma. That's why the combination approach, medication plus therapy, often works best. As we move deeper into healing, we hit what some call the integration stage. This is where the trauma stops being this overwhelming, defining thing and becomes part of your story, but not the whole story. You start to develop what researchers call post-traumatic growth. You might find new meaning, deeper relationships, a clearer sense of purpose. You don't forget what happened, but it loses its grip on you. This is also where we address something called complex PTSD, or CPTSD. This develops from prolonged, repeated trauma, things like childhood abuse, domestic violence, being in a war zone for months or years. With CPTSD, you don't just have the flashbacks and hypervigilance. You also struggle with emotional regulation, negative self-perception, difficulty in relationships. The healing process is longer, and it often requires addressing these deeper patterns of how you see yourself and relate to others. Throughout all of this, one principle keeps coming up: safety first. Before you can process trauma, you need to feel safe enough to do so. This means safety in your environment, safety in your body, safety in your therapeutic relationship. If you're still in an abusive situation, or if you're homeless, or if you're actively using substances to cope, the priority is stabilizing those things first. You can't do deep trauma work when you're just trying to survive. And let's be real about the timeline. Healing from PTSD isn't a 6-week program. It's not a year. For many people, it's a multi-year journey with ups and downs. You might feel great for months, then have a trigger that sets you back. That doesn't mean you failed. It means you're human, and trauma recovery isn't linear. The setbacks get shorter and less intense over time, but they happen. So what does all this mean practically? If you're struggling with PTSD, here's what I'd suggest. First, find a therapist who specializes in trauma. Not all therapists are trained in this, and general talk therapy often isn't enough. Look for someone certified in EMDR trauma, focused CBT, somatic experiencing, or other evidence-based approaches. If you can't afford private therapy, look for community mental health centers or training clinics that offer sliding scale fees. Second, be patient with your body. Trauma lives in the body, and sometimes progress means just noticing that your shoulders are tense and learning to relax them. It means tracking your arousal levels throughout the day and learning what helps you calm down. Yoga, Tai Chi, regular exercise, these aren't just nice to have. They're part of the treatment. Third, build your support system, but do it carefully. You need people who believe you, who don't minimize what happened, who can sit with you in the hard moments without trying to fix it. Support groups, either in person or online, can be incredibly validating. There's something powerful about being in a room with people who just get it. Fourth, educate yourself. Understanding what's happening in your brain and body can be incredibly empowering. It helps you stop blaming yourself and start seeing your symptoms as adaptations that made sense at the time. Books like The Body Keeps the Score by Bessel van der Kolk have helped millions of people understand their experiences. And finally, hold on to hope. The research is clear. Most people with PTSD can and do recover. Not to who they were before. Trauma changes us, but to something often deeper and more resilient. You can have a life where the trauma is a chapter, not the whole book, where you feel safe in your body, connected to others, able to experience joy without guilt. Healing from PTSD is one of the hardest things anyone can do. It requires courage to face what happened, patience with the process, and compassion for yourself. But it's absolutely possible. If you're on this journey, keep going. You're not broken. You're adapting. And with the right support, you can adapt toward something better. That's all for today. If you found this helpful, please like and subscribe. And if you're struggling, please reach out to a professional. You don't have to do this alone. Take care of yourselves, and I'll see you in the next video.